Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing another episode of Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and compare them to their real-life fossil counterparts. And today, really excitingly, we're going to be going through a lot of Paleo edits again, but we've got not just from Feilong, we've got some from a really cool artist. You might know them from like Saurian. They did a couple sketches for the Saurian book, Pickle. Really awesome, and I'm really excited to get stuck in this one. So we've got a few remasters today, or kind of remakes, so paleo accurate, you know how they go. It's kind of what's been dominating these things lately. So we're going to be starting off today. We've got Akyothoma, so that's a really cool one that we're going to talk about, so let's release it. So let's have a look at the first person view. They're perfect in size for this, but we have here Akyothoma. So I feel like a lot of people really slept on this guy, but he's really interesting. It especially tells us about the evolution of like the ornithomimid dinosaurs. So you can see, we'll talk about first some of the changes here. We can see obviously the body's much more rounded. These guys are called ostrich dinosaurs for a reason. They look much more like birds than they do a lot of reptiles, and you can see. And the funny thing as well is that they have that more lizard-style hip, similar to a lot of other theropods, rather than the bird hip dinosaurs, which are not related to birds at all. So it's very interesting how convergent evolution happens, but really wonderful here. You can see the. I really like how I'm pretty sure their hands are the right way. Yep, looks like it. Might need to be a little bit bigger, but the most obvious things is of the feathers and things like that. But this generally fits the anatomy of Akyothoma much better than the original one, and yeah, just their general anatomy as well, and especially the changes in the head as well. Though we don't really know what the head of Akyothoma looks like. But the thing that makes Akyothoma so interesting compared to a lot of the others is that these guys are really early in the evolution of ornithomimids. So these guys are known from the Dasuba Formation in Asia, which is about the Cenomanian age, which is about 95 to 96 million years ago, so that's like early Cretaceous as well. And there's actually two species. I believe there's one from Asia and there's one from America, which was originally named as a new species of Dryptosaurus, and then originally called an ornithomimid, and then called Akyothoma. So however, some people have kind of not really taken that too seriously. It's one of those things that's like, it's been suggested. That particular specimen's kind of been all over the place, so you can't really say too much about that. But these guys were a medium-sized ornithomimosaur, so they weren't too different in that. They're just a little bit smaller than most. And they weighed about 45 to 91 kilograms, or 99 to 21 pounds, and is about 3 meters long, so about the size as like an emu or something like that, maybe potentially quite a bit bigger than that. And like them, they would have had feathers and all that. So feathers, they would have had wings that we know, because we have some pretty good feather impressions from a lot of ornithomimids, but until Pyroraptor comes out, we don't quite have good feathers in the game yet. But yeah, another cool thing about these guys is that they're more closely related to animals such as Acrocanthosaurus, which is a like kind of I wouldn't say mid, but like it's in its own family of ornithomimids called Giganotosaurus, and it also has Gallimimus and Feilong, which is very large actually. It's actually the second largest ornithomimid other than Dinosaurus. So really interesting. The taxonomy is always changing, things like that. And these guys would have lived during the Cenomanian, or the 96 million years ago. So that would have been like late Cretaceous, around that age, where they were doing lots of floodplains and things like that. And these guys would have been living with hadrosaurs and stuff. And these guys are believed to be omnivores, so they would have been eating small mammals, plants, fruits with their beak. And so they would have been. That's another thing I forgot to mention. They would have had a beak, so a lot of that mouth there would be no lips, so it'd be keratin. And they're actually known with animals such as Allosaurus, Gigantoraptor, Electrosaurus, Pseudosaurus, and a lot of those kind of animals living in that time. So yeah, another really cool animals. So as I mentioned, the issues like the feathers, the hands are fine though. I think it really makes it much more like what an ornithomimid should look like versus the original game. So we'll let them run off and do their thing. I want them to get out of the way, of course, because they like hanging out around here. So, there we are. So next we've got Struthiaminus, everyone's kind of favorite American ornithomimid. So let's have a look at these guys here. Oh, we'll have a look in the first person view because they're not quite as big. Look at these wonderful guys here. So this is Struthiaminus, which names more directly means ostrich mammoth because Struthio is the genus name for ornithomimid. Struthio is the genus name for ostriches. And yeah, you can see a lot of the changes here. I think the body looks much better as well. You can see that it's a lot more elongated and more like almost like a long oval that fits their body more. They've also got slightly longer tail by the looks of it. Really bird-like legs. These guys, as you can see, they're very superficially like an ostrich, but they're not very closely related. Hands are still pronated. They would have had them to the side. They would have looked much more like a bird wing with the feathers and all that on them. And then you can see the skull here. They've got like a much more like rounded skull compared to something like Gallimimus, as we'll get into soon. These guys had a much more like rounded skull and all that. Really interesting. And then I really like they added this like dewlap or this little pouch at the neck here. I think it really came out really nice and makes it look different. But yeah, other than the missing of the feathers and the hands, this is actually pretty spot on. So Struthiaminus is obviously one of those ones that is quite famous. I believe it's from America. Yeah, it was described in like 1917. I don't want to talk too much about these guys because there's already information on them in the game. But I just thought it would be really interesting to talk about Akyothoma just because it's kind of underrated in that aspect. But these guys are not too different. These guys should have. These guys do have beaks, I think. They look like they do. So yeah, the beak is much more accurate to these guys. And these guys would have been eating similar things such as small mammal, snakes, plants, just that omnivorous diet. And these are one of the most common ones in North America. They were quite common. Really, really cool. And then you can even see the comparison here. This guy's a bit longer. Really, really nice. It's really nice to see the Struthiaminus. And it's cool because these are the kind of animals that don't get a lot of paleo edits because people just think, oh, the cool theropods and the ceratopsians. But it's really, I think, it really adds a lot to the animals. So next we've got Gallimimus. So let's have a look at the Gallimimus. Oh, we don't want transport, we want first person view, because these guys are huge. So we've got our wonderful Gallimimus over here. So Gallimimus is a very interesting one. They are like the third largest out of all the ornithomimids, other than like Feilong and Dinosaurus. These guys would have been about 5-6 meters long, so quite big animals actually. And you can kind of see from their body there, you can see the changes. Also quite a lot elongated, very much more kind of almost ostrich-like. Very, very long. They also have this really interesting head, if we have a look here. They've got like this downturned head. Let's see if we can get a good look. I might have to go into camera view. Let's have a look. That might get us a better look. Ooh. Oh, we don't want that. We just want to hide the UI and get a good look. Sorry about that. You can see the wonderful differences on the head here. So they've got like this very long downturned snout. That kind of implies they would have been having a different ecology. No beak, of course, because that's kind of like consistent with the ornithomimids in Jurassic Park and World, it seems, which kind of sucks. And we have this wonderful big dewlap thing going on here. Looks really, really nice. Long neck. Obviously, the hands are still wrong. They've got that bunny rabbit look when they should be like looking like they're gonna clap, and they should be having feathers all over them, as I've kind of mentioned. You can see that elongated body really looks much more accurate to what we know from these guys. Quite long arms these guys have as well, so I think these actually might be a bit too small. and they've got quite comparatively small feet, which is reflected well on these. And then the tail could probably be a little longer, but I think it looks all right. But yeah, obviously the same things: tails, no beak, feathers. It'd be really cool if one of the Ornithomimids almost got like a remaster with feathered skins, and I think that'd be really, really cool. Something to add in the future. Yeah, really, really nice. So these are all the Ornithomimids in the game so far, done by Feilong, who did a nice accuracy edit. The thing I like about Feilong's edits is that, obviously I've pointed out sometimes how wrong a lot of them are, because they aren't 100%, but they still fit the style quite well. And I want to go through Liv's, because Liv's like redone hers, and they look awesome. And I really want to go through and talk about them, but I want to do that after the pack Dominion pack comes out, because I feel like there's just not enough time. But yeah, really, really awesome. Came out rather well. So let them run off and do their thing. So next we've got back with Pickle again, as I mentioned. Good old Pickle. Has kind of done an Allosaurid pack. So these are paleo edits of animals that are considered Allosauroids or Carnotasaurus. So that includes, like, as we see here, Metrocanthosaurus, was his Allosaurus, and Acrocanthosaurus, and Giganotosaurus, and animals like that. So we're going to have been looking at kind of the least well-known of these guys. So this is Metrocanthosaurus. We'll have a looky-loo. So let's pause them right here and get a good look. So Metrocanthosaurus is actually not that well known, sadly. It's really only known from like a few of the leg bones, or it's owned from like a femur, some of the boot and the hip, and some vertebrae. So it's really not that well known. But it's often reconstructed a lot like its more Asian relatives. We'll have a look under them here. I think we'll let it play a bit, and then there we are. Oh no, I keep messing up today. That's okay, but we'll have a look. So you can see this wonderful Metrocanthosaurus. We can see it's modeled much more similar to animals such as like Sinraptor and those more Asian Allosaurids or European Gomus ones. But yeah, it's really not known for much. This is from the Oxford clay from the late Jurassic, and was discovered quite early. It was like, I believe, I actually don't know about when it was discovered, but really, really interesting animal. And you can see its anatomy just looks so much better compared to what we know of Allosaurids in general, rather than just like, oh, Allosaurus. But we can see some of the changes to the face here. Pickle has a really good understanding of dinosaur anatomy, so it's really cool to see that here. We can see the right hands. I really like the what we know from Metrocanthosaurus is that it's got like a little bit of an arch going up there. The neural spines going up that way. It looks really, really nice. This nice thick tail. These legs look so much better. I like the feet. The feet look pretty big. Also the big thighs there. These guys would have very chicken-like legs, but very powerful, because obviously they're much larger. This size, I think, estimated is about 7 meters long, or 7-8 meters long, and about a little over a ton. So these guys would have been pretty big. And then you can see the wonderful neck here. A lot of these Allosaurids have these kind of S-shaped necks that have been very powerful, full of muscles. And then you have the crest there that would have been often probably used for display. And big, tall face, because Allosaurids were kind of more adapted. They didn't have quite the strong bite forces of animals like Tyrannosaurids, which was specifically adapted to hunt prey that was really tough, such as ceratopsians and not Allosaurids, not hadrosaurs either, and Chylosaurs. Keep missing through. But these guys would have been hunting things more like sauropods and hadrosaurs, which on average, or mostly, weren't quite as hard to bite into than those ankylosaurs and ceratopsians. But really nice model. You can see the lips as well. This just looks like a real animal popped out of this screen. So I think Pickle did a really wonderful job depicting these guys, and especially from that we don't know much of it. It's cool that he managed to really come up with something that really gives it some unique look, especially with the crest there. I think it looks really wonderful. Pickle, you always do a wonderful job. So let them run off and do their thing. So next we're going to move on to the rest of the Allosaurids. We're going to be coming up with everyone's favorite big bad line of the Jurassic. Everyone knows who that is. We've got Allosaurus. So we'll have a look at this one out here. I want to have a look at this one, so but I think we'll just wait for him to straighten up a bit. Because this one, I think, just shows off the best default color, because these ones are kind of all weird all over the place, but you can see some of the wonderful changes made here. I love the texture on the original Allosaurus, so I think it really fits on this guy here, but we can see this is based off mostly, like, Allosaurus fragilis, and there's obviously people talking about, oh, Saurophagonax is an adult, and which is most likely true, but it's taxonomy being taxonomy. We can see some of the changes here. The face has been a lot more elongated, and I think even, like, thinned up a bit, because as I mentioned, these Allosauroids have very long, thin heads, and he's got these long teeth used for shearing through flesh. And these wonderful big crests here, they would have been probably used for some sort of display, be that sexual or social displays, things like that. And then we can see this long face they've got here, and I really like these wrinkles. It really came out nicely. They've also got this long S-shaped neck that they would have used. Very powerful neck, especially since they were using their heads a lot. Would have been able to deal with the pressures of like grabbing prey and things like that. Very muscular. There's kind of a myth as well of these guys were almost like running into animals like hatchet-jaw with their mouth open and just ripping into them. But that's kind of a myth based on some kind of iffy studies. But really, really cool. I really like the addition of these spikes. Well, they were already on the model, but I like how he changed them to really fit on this guy here. Then you can see these guys have the big three-fingered hand. You can see some of the changes there. Really, really looks nice. Allosaurids did have large arms that would have potentially used for like grasping prey and things like that. And then you can see this wonderfully thick body that they've got, of course. So most dinosaurs kind of have that, almost like birds, they kind of have a really thick body. They don't have a any lumbar spines or vertebrae, so they literally probably weren't moving around their torso like we or a lion can. They wouldn't run like that, but much more bird-like in that way. And there would have been some flexibility, of course, but not as much as like us. And then you can see some of these wonderful big legs that they've got here, because obviously being a big animal, they need to have big legs and also very bird-like. Very, very long. You can see the very big thighs here and then the big calf. And then all of this would have been tendon and fat. And I really like the addition of the three toes there. And a lot of people even like base it a lot more off ostriches, and it really makes it look a lot more because they would have had big fleshy pads, obviously, to deal with their heavy weight. And then you can see this quite long tail. Allosaurus is actually known for a quite long tail. And I think it came out rather wonderfully. And you can see... One interesting thing about dinosaurs as well is that often, when people draw them, they don't understand how their legs work. As you can see here, they kind of... there would have been their hip here, and then they almost like splay out because their body's like a big round thing in the middle. So the femur would be coming up from the hip here, and then kind of ducks down and then goes under that. That's an adaptation to help better support their weight, so they're a lot stronger and able to deal rather than being far out. So these guys kind of had it nice and tight, so they would be able to support themselves better. And these long tails would also be excellent counterbalances. Yeah, really, really awesome. So really nice to see some Allosaurus. I'm a big fan of this. I'm a big fan, so I hope you guys download these because these are really nice. So let's let them run out of there. So next one's also done by Pickle. We've got Acrocanthosaurus, everyone's kind of favorite high-spined lizards. So really excited to have a look at these guys as well. I think this guy deserves a look through the thing as well. Ooh. There we are. So we can have a look at our wonderful Acrocanthosaurus. Quite a lean lizard, as you can see. Well, not technically a lizard, but I really like how this guy's come out. Acrocanthosaurus is one of those like early-ish like Carnotasaurids, so it looks very different from these kind of earlier Allosaurids like Allosaurus itself. Yeah. And then we can see like the really wonderful head it's got here. Very tall. Face here, there would have been lots of spaces like the fenestra here and a lot of anchors for muscles here. They wouldn't have that quite strong a bite as obviously mentioned Tyrannosaurus, but they would have still had a pretty powerful bite. I believe estimated for animals like Giganotosaurus, as we'll see later, is about 2 tons, so it's still quite a powerful bite. And then you can see what really makes it weird in its profile is these really tall neural spines going down its back and then neck and down its tail. And a lot of people often over muscle them because they think, oh, it's like a hump. But seeming to how they're adapted, it seems like this is kind of the best way to do it. It just adds a bit of tall of a profile to it. We really don't know. Maybe it could have had some sort of way of storing fat, though most reptiles store fat in their tails, potentially add more areas for musculature, things like that. Especially with this big, powerful neck they got here, they've still got that S-shaped neck that have been very useful for grabbing prey with their jaws. And then you can see the wonderful arms here. Acrocanthosaurus hasn't really had that big arms, but they still had the 3 digits, and that would have been potentially useful for grasping prey with this really big first claw here. Looks really, really awesome. And then you can see that round body and the ischium and the pubic bootle are going out there. More lizard hip. They've also got these very powerful legs, similar to the other guys here. Very, very big thighs and big calves, and these large feet as well. And they've got the hallux as well, the fourth toe. And this very, very long tail, as you can see here. So yeah, really nice Acrocanthosaurus. Big fan. I really like it because it this one, because it doesn't really over muscle, I think. Because a lot of people make it just like a really over muscly, and it looks like it's just going to topple because it's just so tall and stuff like that. But I really like how that looks. It's like properly muscled. Plus, on the opposite side, and probably much more common, they often shrink wrap. So there's a lot of the bones you can see in the spines kind of showing, and it looks kind of weird. I think this is kind of the perfect amount. But obviously, that's a bit of subjection by personal preference. But really, this is probably the best way to have a look at it from a naturalistic perspective. So yeah, really, really cool. So let you run off and do your thing. I want to make sure you don't crawl in front of my hatchery. So next we've got Carnotasaurus. So we've got everyone's favorite big African Carnotasaurus. A really wonderful animal, if I do say so myself. So we can see some of the changes here. If you guys remember the original game, it's got this really, really weird pointy face, but I think this design does a really good job of like keeping that pointy design, because I think it looks really nice, but changing it to better fit the skeleton. So you can see Carnotasaurus has a really, really tall head. It's like even more exaggerated than Acrocanthosaurus. It's very, very tall. With lots of air spaces in here, like the fenestrae, would have been very good at keeping light and stuff. And then you have these teeth that are much more blade-like for shearing flesh as well. Quite a long face. And also had this crest as well. Not as obvious as something like Allosaurus or that Metrocanthosaurus, but I think how they did it here with the spikes, I think came out really nice. Did a really good job, Pickle. And then you have this head. It's not as big as a lot of the others, but I think still looks quite nice regardless. Oftentimes it's based on the skeletal, and it's just that sometimes artistic interpretation sometimes. And you can see this quite roundish body. They also had a, not as extreme as Acrocanthosaurus, but they did have these kind of tall neural spines going down the neck and back here. There kind of seems to be a theme. And you can see it's quite tall, really adds to the profile here. And then you can see this quite roundish body and these large grasping claws that they also had. Very similar to, of course, most Allosaurids and Carnotasaurus. Same with their legs as well. Not too different from Big Acro there. And then you have this really, really long tail. Looks really, really cool. And it's cool that we got all this representation because it's pretty much everyone's favorite big carnivores. We've got an American Allosaurid there, or early Cretaceous Allosaurid. Then also we've got African, and then we've got South American as well. So it really fleshes out our world a little bit. And I really like the skin as well. Yeah, I'm a big fan of how this one's come out. Pickle has really done a wonderful job. And then last, and most definitely not least, we'll wait for you to run off and do your thing, because I know, and I don't want you coming anywhere near here, so just run off. Next, we've got Giganotosaurus. So we can see this wonderful image of Giganotosaurus. Uh, really, really nice. So you can see kind of the differences here. They've also got a very tall skull, and more recent kind of finds show that they've got a skull that's not as... It's much more rounded there, and they've got these big crests shown off here. Would have been very potentially cool for display, things like that. And they've also got very similar... They're quite similar to Carnotasaurus, of course, and I like how the spikes have been back incorporated into design to create something really, really distinct. And you can see they've got these large arms with the claws, obviously, to attack prey. Large neck as well, the kind of S shape going on there. Really, really rectangular body and these large legs, of course. And these guys, I can't wait to see if the Dominion model, that's going to be very interesting to see in game. And that's only coming out in the next like a week or so, so that'll be very awesome. Very, very long tail, as you can see here. These guys were pretty much the same length, if not longer, than Tyrannosaurus rex, like 13 meters or so, so very big animals. And very different ecology-wise, as I mentioned, with sharing flesh and not having quite as strong a bite force. I also really like these little spikes down here and the kind of flesh and skin hanging off here. I think that looks really nice. Really big thighs as well, and all the same things as I mentioned on the Giganotosaurus and the Acrocanthosaurus. And then you got the long tail here with the large bulge here. That would have been for the cardiofemoralis muscle, which is a very important muscle in crocodilians. It kind of helps with walking, and it covers about that third of the tail. And in crocodiles, it's very big for swimming, of course. But dinosaurs didn't swim nowhere near as much as a crocodile or an alligator, so they don't obviously need it as much. And you can see the large feet that they've got here. Really, really wonderful. So yeah, just these little tweaks that make it look much more like a realistic animal. And I love the head bosses that they've got here. There's lots of keratin on them, if you imagine them. Would have been really, really nice. So yeah, done quite nice. Nice profile, all of that. So all these Allosauroids, the Metrocanthosaurus, the Allosaurus, the Acrocanthosaurus, the Giganotosaurus, and the Giganotosaurus, all done by Pickle. And this next one, along with the ornithomimids that we have here, have all been done by Feilong. So we've got his new extremely big and extremely accurate Spinosaurus, which we're going to talk about very interestingly. So let's have a look at our last, but certainly not least animal, Spinosaurus. So that's a very big Spinosaurus. So you can see it's made extremely big and extremely accurate is kind of the tagline for it, but we can see some of the changes here. So comes after like the 2020 redescription of its tail as well. It shows that Spinosaurus actually had a very large tail, and then the 2014 one was talking about how short its legs are. So that really interestingly sparked that debate of it being aquatic, but we can see a lot of the changes here, much thinner snout and longer snout, but that hook there, which was easily adapted for catching slippery prey such as fish and small crocodiles, basically anything large enough and they would eat. Anything small enough they would eat, really. I think that's the best way to say it. And they got this very, very long, almost heron-like neck, which almost gives like a little debate into its ecology. Very large arms with these big claws. We have arms from Spinosaurus, but they're not formally described, I think. At least not yet. So that could really be another big 2020 change to these guys. So maybe they had big, like, knuckle walking. We really don't know yet, but it'd be very interesting to see. Very large claws, as you can see, based off other Spinosaurids. So large claws for grasping prey. These guys would have relied a lot more on their arms. And then you can see this quite long body here. Short legs, as I mentioned. There's lots of variations within the interpretations of the sail. This is kind of like that M sail kind of shape. Or just a big D, really, like a flat D. That's what it is. And then you can have this really, really long tail. So this would have been very likely some sort of paddle to swim through the water. Though they're, exactly how aquatic they are has been a really subject to debate. But there has been a recent paper describing, looking at the bones. So what they did was take cuts of different bones from all sorts of different animals, from penguins to elephants to hippos to dinosaurs to all sorts of extinct and extant animals. So directly comparing and trying to come up with a way to directly measure how aquatic an animal is based on its bone density. And it seems like Spinosaurus and Baryonyx were very much adapted for this kind of habitat. So Baryonyx would have been almost like kind of, they say kind of, they would have had a lot of adaptations, but not really noticeable enough to really say that's definitely aquatic. So it would be comparable to things like hippos. Like if you looked at a hippo, it's not obviously aquatic, but we know that from their obviously biology because we can see them alive. And Spinosaurus kind of falls almost in that same kind of range where they're just starting to evolve all the adaptations to become aquatic. And this paper's anything with Spinosaurus is at least a bit controversial because big dinosaurs also have people with working dinosaurs also sometimes have egos and they want to. And plus, it's same with T-Rex. It's just science. People don't always agree on everything, which is kind of good. It's kind of bad sometimes, but kind of good. It depends. As long as it's backed up by research, okay? So as long as you got some way to back yourself up on your views, you're usually pretty good. But they talk about sometimes that it may have had much more of a heron-type ecology, like wading in the water, which is kind of weird because you'd think heron, long legs, and not a big tail like this. Potentially could have been, they kind of also talk about it as being a pursuit predator, which is actually very rare. Really, things like swordfish is a really weird comparison. I think they made in one of the papers as well. But yeah, something like almost like a crocker heron is kind of the best thing. It's probably pretty much its own novel ecology, considering it's a very different animal. But yeah, really, really nice rendition of this. And obviously, Spinosaurus being the animal that it is always going to change and spark discussions and things like that. But it's really nice to see accurate Spinosaurus in Jurassic World that reflects the latest knowledge. And as science always changes, this is going to change. You're probably going to have to come out in the next year or two when they talk about they finding arms that it turns out they walk on their palms or something. They're like quadrupedal or something. Though that was an original hypothesis, it wasn't really based on the fossils. It was just kind of, it's got short legs, maybe it needed its forelimbs to walk on, but obviously we don't know until we have the forelimbs described. But yeah, really, really awesome, Feilong. You did a wonderful job. So we're going to let this guy run off and do his thing. And you can see that little crest there as well that they have. So yeah, really, really nice Spinosaurus. So I think this is going to be a perfect place to end the video. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.